There we go. In 1958, he was looking at 6th graders, and he gave them the chance to cheat. The ones who cheated became more lenient toward cheating, of course. It's okay to cheat because they do it, therefore it must be okay. The ones that didn't adopted a much harsher attitude toward cheating, as interesting as that is. It's kind of like a slippery slope. It's kind of like a downward slippery slope. If you start cheating, it seems okay. And you're more likely to continue to cheat. But of course, we don't even go into. I told you about the fraternity wedge, where they. Yeah, I know. I was so pissed off when I found it. According to Weston in 2006, people twirl the cognitive kaleidoscope until the pieces fall into the pattern that they want to see. So if cheating, this test is too hard for anybody to pass. Therefore, if everybody cheats, therefore it's okay if I cheat. The brain will repay these individuals by activating circuits involved in pleasure, not unlike the addicts that feel when they get a fix. So when they start cheating or stealing, it's okay. It's okay because they've rationalized it in their brains, and now it actually becomes exciting for them. So when they do it, it gives them the same buzz that they would get if they were using drugs, as odd as that may seem. We can find dissonance operating in almost every part of the world, but it does not always take the same form, and the content of the cognitions that produce it may differ across cultures. In a more collectivist culture, their idea of dissonance is completely different. Their dissonance has to do with the group. So if they do something against the group, of course it will give them the same buzz as it does an individualist doing something else. I mean, doing like cheating or stealing or whatever. Let me give you an example. In Japan, many people will vicariously experience dissonance on the part of someone that they know and like. So Francis and I are buddies, and Edison gives Francis a hard time. So now I don't like Edison because he's given Francis a hard time. But if I were in Japan, what would happen is that when the two of them are together, my dissonance, my ill feelings toward Edison would be less. So to Edison's face, I'm acting nice toward him. As soon as Edison leaves, now all of a sudden I'm as angry as you are before because he gives you a hard time. But while the three of us are together, I act as if there's nothing wrong. That's the way it happens in Japan. But in the United States, if Edison gives Francis a hard time, and I'm friends with Francis, then when Edison's around, I act negatively toward Edison as well. I have negative thoughts about Edison also. So it's the very opposite in the United States. In Japan, they put on a happy face. In Japan, despite the fact that Edison is giving Francis a hard time, in Japan, I still act positively toward Edison. So in essence, I'm hiding my ill feelings. Does that make sense? All right. Collectivist societies, as odd as that may seem, I know, the whole Japanese thing, very interesting group of people. So you never know what they're thinking. In the United States, immigrant parents and their young adult children often clash over cultural values. One of the things you have to remember is that, except for you guys, everybody else in the United States are all immigrants. So at some point, their people came to the United States as immigrants. And then there were first-generation immigrants, or second-generation immigrants, actually. Those were their children. So all of the people, no matter who you are, unless you're an American Indian, all of those individuals, everybody went through the same thing. The parents wanted them to maintain their culture. But the children, who had potentially been born in the United States, they wanted to act like their American peers. But the parents wanted them to act, they wanted them to accept their culture. And this caused a great deal of conflict between the parents and the children. It also caused a great deal of cognitive dissonance for the children, because the children are getting pressure from their friends to act like Americans or whatever, and from their parents they want them to act like Greeks or Lithuanians or whatever. Okay? So all immigrants to the United States, no matter how long you've been here, potentially their families have had all of these cultural conflicts taking place. And it's one of the problems that we've had in the United States. With not especially political groups, but actually, yes, political groups. The anarchists in the at the end of the 19th century, the anarchists that blossomed. Where did they find all of their recruits in the United States? Well, they came from the immigrants. They came from second-generation immigrants. It's really kind of interesting. We were studying this in cultural psychology. And it turns out that male and female immigrant children act differently. The female immigrant children want to assimilate as quickly as they possibly can. They want to act like they want everything to be harmonious. But the males are the ones that are more likely to rebel and to do something to attack the United States. A good example is those two brothers that came over here, and one of them was a radical and the other one wasn't. And then they decided that they were going to blow up the Boston Marathon, that they were going to plant bombs at the Boston Marathon because they were angry at the United States, or at least the older one was. And they planted the bombs, the two of them planted the bombs, and eventually the older one was killed, of course, but they hated the United States for this reason specifically, because they couldn't assimilate, and they didn't feel like they were that they could assimilate as well as their sister, except they didn't have a sister. Anyway, as confusing as that is. Okay, in a longitudinal study of Vietnamese and Cambodian adolescents in the United States, those suffering the most cognitive dissonance were the ones that were the most likely to get into trouble. They did less well in school, of course, and they were the ones that fought with their parents more. And the problem was, of course, cognitive dissonance. The problem was that they were trying to assimilate, and the parents were trying to keep them good boys, and they became gang members. This is a really serious problem in Los Angeles. The second generation Vietnamese kids that came out of Vietnam, those kids that their parents were brought over here because they were loyal. They were loyal to not just the United States, they're actually being loyal to the Vietnamese government. Wait a minute. I kind of missed this last time. There we go. Okay. They're being loyal to the Vietnamese government or the Cambodian government. And we brought them over here because they were anti-communist. So there's a huge group of these guys. Well, the kids are the ones that are forming all the gangs and whatnot, and going against their culture, their own culture. They're trying to assimilate, but at the same time, they're trying to maintain their identity by joining these gangs. Is that melted? Oh, okay. I thought it was chewy. Okay. When we put a great deal of effort into a project and then the project does not appear to have been worthwhile, we can justify our efforts through a process called justification of effort. We do this all the time. You get into something, you get into a graduate program, and all of a sudden it turns out not to be exactly what you thought it was going to be. But you have to finish, and the reason you have to finish is because you're rationalizing in your own mind, maintaining, doing what you're doing, and that's known as justification of effort. We see this a lot in the United States when people join the military. Then they go through basic training. Basic training is hard. They're trying to make it unpleasant for you. They don't want you to be a happy person. They want you to be unhappy. So basic training is really, really difficult, and you have to accept people yelling and screaming at you and calling you all kinds of interesting names. At least that's the old days. I don't know what they're doing now. But about 3 weeks into it, you're going, oh my God, this is the worst thing in the whole wide world. I can't imagine that I actually wanted to join the military. And of course, at that point, justification of effort has to take place. You start rationalizing to yourself. You start interpreting the ambiguous as the positive, as positive. Well, oh my goodness, we get at least we get three hots in a cot. We get 3 good meals, and they let us sleep in an almost comfortable bed. That's almost positive. And of course, the more effort you have to put into this, and basic training is very, very physically difficult, the stronger the justification. So, and that's actually what they're trying to do. What they're trying to do is they're trying to break you down so that they can build you back up. They're trying to make it as noxious for you as possible so that you will have to justify it in your own mind. And at that point, you either rebel and leave, or you become a patriot, a strong, staunch patriot. And that's what the military does to you. The different branches of the service are different. Air Force isn't nearly as bad as the Marines or the Army. The Army, of course, and the Marines have to break you down completely, and then build you back up. And when they build you back up, you become a very staunch patriot. Justification can be internal, changing something about yourself to reduce dissonance, or it can be external. The reason for the dissonance is outside the person and involves an external result, such as a reward or avoiding punishment. So it could be internal justification or external justification. Usually in the case of basic training, it has to be an internal justification. You're the one that joined the military. You're the one that has to deal with this. Oh, the next picture has women in their underwear. I apologize, but there is a point to it, okay? All right. Often in order to be polite in society, we have to develop an opinion or attitude that runs counter to our own beliefs and attitudes, and this is known as counter-attitudinal advocacy. When we do this with external justification, we may begin believing the lie that we are being told. And of course, the whole reason I put this up here is because if you look at the Victoria's Secret models and you look at the Dove models, you can see that they don't look the same. Okay. Most people don't look like this. Okay, this is not a normal human being, and that's the reason I put it up there. Both of them are in their underwear. Both groups are in their underwear, but this looks more like what people look like. So when we're talking about counter-attitudinal justification or advocacy, we're looking at telling ourselves what's right and what's wrong. It's the same. It used to be the same way with the swimsuit issue, the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue that came out last week. They only had really, really skinny ladies in there, and now they've started putting women that aren't that skinny, I guess. There goes a dog. I wonder where my dogs are. Damn it. My dogs escaped this morning. They were right out here, just before class. And it looks like they've gone home. I hope they have. Dummies. What am I going to do? That dog keeps knocking my fence down. My dogs can't knock it down because I've secured it from the inside. But you can knock it down from the outside, and the other dog keeps knocking my fence down. So my dogs can escape. Yeah.
Call maintenance and have them pick up that dog.
It's Herman's dog.
Dr. Peterson.
Yeah.
Call Herman and tell him.
Herman, he's so depressed. I don't know if I can do that. I'd probably commit suicide or something. You think I'm kidding? Festinger and Carl Smith in 1959 discovered that when you offer someone a large external reward to go against their beliefs, they justify the change with the large reward and don't change their beliefs. So you can't offer somebody $1 million to change their political party. It's not going to work. They're not going to start believing in a different way. Money is not going to do it. However, you can change people's minds. You can force them to change the way they think by giving them small rewards. This is kind of exciting because I know. We can change your beliefs by giving you small rewards. We can change the way you think by giving you a small reward. Now, if I tell you I'll give you $100 if you start, I don't know, acting white or something, I don't know. If I'm going to give you $100 if you do that, it's not going to change the way you think. But if I give you a tiny reward, if I give you a small reward, then it's going to change the way that you actually think. In the last election, the people in the United States voted the most conservative they've ever voted. What in the world happened? What happened? Why did so many people change their minds and change their votes? Do we have that many millionaires and billionaires? They just passed a new tax plan, and the tax plan doesn't help anybody except really rich people. Well, it helps the middle class for a couple of years, and then it's not. Then all of your benefits are going to go away. So we have all these middle class people, and they all voted for Donald Trump, knowing that he was going to change the taxes. Why did they do it? They're only getting a small reward, a tiny little reward. When you're talking about taxes, and you're talking about how much money you have to pay for taxes, well, you pay all that money anyway. All that money's gone. It just automatically comes out of your paycheck. You don't even notice that it's gone. So he's going to save me $100? What's that? That's what? Less than $10 a paycheck. And I'm going to go for that? Well, some people did. Some poor people did. That tiny little piece of money, and they voted. They changed their vote. They changed the way they think. They literally changed the way they think. And now that he's been in office for over a year, a lot of these individuals are still backing him, despite the fact that he's done this and that and the other. Looks like there's potentially Russian collusion. I don't know. Every day it looks worse and worse. He lost his communications director yesterday. Hope Hicks resigned yesterday. Well, she said she's going to resign yesterday. She's going to actually resign next Wednesday.
Who?
Hope Hicks.
Oh.
That really attractive lady that never says anything. She's kind of amazing. We get to hear everybody else, but we never get to hear Hope Hicks. But she's the communications director, but she never talks. Wait a minute, what's this all about? Anyway, really kind of fascinating stuff. So actually what has happened in the United States is this very thing has happened. For a small reward, they've actually changed the way that they think. Now we have more conservatives in the United States. And they don't even question their thoughts. They're still backing the president, no matter what he does, no matter what he says, no matter how stupid he acts, no matter how insulting he is to people. They're not even listening. They've already changed the way that they think. And it's not because he offered them the moon. He offered them a little bit. He offered them the right to not be politically correct. And they have taken that, and that little tiny thing, and now they've changed the way that they vote and the way that they think. It worked.
So why is Russia threatening us this morning?
Are they threatening us? What did we do that they're threatening us?
I don't know what we did to them, but this morning I heard that if we don't blank something, they have a submarine missile that the United States can't counter-react, and they're not afraid to use it. And
my goodness, I wonder what we did.
so now we're being threatened by Korea and Russia. And aren't they the ones that messed up our voting thing? And
Yeah. Well, potentially. That's what we're investigating it. We indicted 13 Russians. Of course, we'll never see them. They're in Russia. Why in the world would they? Oh, sure, I'll come over there to go to your prison. Thank you. That's what I was thinking. I wanted to go to the United States. I know. This is really interesting stuff. So by offering somebody a small amount of money or a small reward, you can get them to change their minds. once upon a time I had a girlfriend, and I hated black olives. Despised black olives. Didn't like the taste. Then she offered to be friendlier to me. I can say that. But one of the things I had to do was eat black olives. I eat black olives all the time now, as you can imagine. I didn't like them before, but she talked me into eating black olives. I changed my palate for her. As strange as that seems. Black olives aren't that bad, I guess. I eat them all the time now. I changed the way that I thought. I changed the way that I feel, just in order for that small reward that I was getting from her. The Festinger and Carl Smith experiment has been replicated many times. They've done this over and over and over again. You give somebody a larger reward, you don't really change their minds. The reason they're doing it is because for the money. But if it's a small reward, internally you have to rationalize why you've done that. In order to do that, you have to change your mind. You have to change your belief system. So the way to change somebody's belief system is to give them a small reward. Does all that make sense? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but that's the way it works. I'd never thought about my first wife and her black olives. That's the way it worked. The smaller the incentive, the greater the softening of the attitude. So you have to rationalize it some way. It's easy to rationalize, well, they gave me $1 million, so yeah, I changed my belief system. That's easy to understand. That's an external justification. But if it's a small reward, it has to be an internal justification. You gave me $1 and now I've changed my mind. This kind of stuff happens all the time. People will send you, they'll ask you to donate money to the March of Dimes. And what do they send you? They send you a nickel. Or the vets will send you 35 cents. Or they'll send you a free stamp. That's 42 cents. Or I don't know, what is it, 50 cents now? I don't know what a stamp is anymore. Anyway. What they're giving you a small reward, and they want to change the way that you do things. They want to change your mind. And this kind of stuff really works. The smaller the incentive, the greater the softening of the attitude. Since there's a little external justification, the justification has to be internal, and of course that's the only way that you can do it. And you get these, well, I get these things on, somebody called me yesterday. I was talking to Marius down the stairs, and I had a telephone call, and it was this person trying to get me to, it was this person trying to get me to go to Branson. I don't know. They're going to give me a free trip to Branson. You know what a free trip to Branson means? They give you a free hotel room. Well, that's not a free trip. I still have to get there. Still have to pay for my food. I get my room for free. That's not, well, I get one thing free, and then I have to pay for everything else. So they were trying to get me to go to Branson. I didn't. I hung up on her. I normally don't, but I hung up on her yesterday. I wanted to talk to Marius. I had something to talk about. Harsh punishment tends to teach us to try to avoid getting caught. So the harsher the punishment, the more likely that instead of changing the way that you think, it changes the way that you act. So you'll try to keep from getting caught next time. It's not going to change the way that you're still going to do it. You'll just be more serious about trying to keep from getting caught. When the child is refraining from doing something he wants to do, and while he does have some justification for not doing it, he lacks complete justification. The justification has to come internally. They have to change the way that they think. And you do that with small punishments. In this situation, he continues to experience dissonance. Therefore, the individual must find another way to justify their actions. And of course, the smaller the punishment, the more likely that they will have to internalize the justification. So instead of severe punishment is probably the last thing that you want to use, because if you punish somebody severely, then they'll just try to stay away from you when they do something wrong. Punishment works in a similar manner to rewards. When punishment is small, the individual is required to justify their behavior internally, and it is more likely to change the way that they think. The only way to justify your behavior is by self-persuasion. This is known as insufficient punishment, of course, and for that reason, the more severe the punishment, the less likely you are to actually get them to change their behavior. The less severe the punishment, the more likely you are to get them to internalize the need to not do whatever they're doing. And this is known as insufficient punishment. Aronson, this is the author of your textbook. Aronson and Carl Smith in 1963 wanted to follow up on the severe and mild punishment paradigm. They threatened severe and mild punishment for children who played with a select toy. They discovered the same cognitive processes in the action with the children and the toy. Okay, so the ones that they threatened with severe punishment, they didn't change their behavior. The children who had received a severe threat continued to rate the forbidden toy as highly desirable or more desirable than they had before the threat. The children in the mild threat condition needed internal justification to reduce their dissonance. They convinced themselves the reason they had not played with the toy was that they did not really like it. They rated the forbidden toy as less attractive than they had when the experiment began. So the more severe the punishment, the more likely that the child still desired the toy. The more mild the punishment, the more that the child would rationalize in their own minds that they didn't really want to play with the toy anyway. I was I took my grandson over to one of his friends' houses, and there were just a bunch of kids, and they had this electric car, which was kind of cool. It's an electric car. So the kids kept fighting over that electric car. And the reason they were fighting over it was because all the kids wanted it, I guess. So all the kids seemed to want to be the next one. And so what they would do, they would rotate driving the car. And the idea was that this kid would drive, and then the kid in the passenger seat would be the next one to drive, and he'd have to get out, and somebody else would get in the passenger seat. That's the way it was supposed to work. Of course, the kid that actually owned the car didn't want to get out of the driver's seat because he saw that everybody wanted to drive the car. Now, the interesting thing was, I talked to his mother, and his mother says, he never plays with that. The only time he ever plays with it, if kids come over, and then he won't let any other kid play with that toy. Well, it's kind of like the dog in the manger. The dog is laying in the straw, and the cow wants to eat the straw, and the dog won't let the cow eat the straw. Well, the dog doesn't want to eat the manger. He doesn't want to eat the hay in the manger. But somebody else wants it, so that's why he drives them off. Well, it was the same thing that was happening with the car. And it's similar to what we're talking about here. The more that people want it, the more that this individual wants it. I've never wanted to go to Las Vegas, but a lot of people, they just desire it to no end. I have a sister that she saves up all year long so that she can have this fabulous trip to Las Vegas. And then when she comes back, she wonders why. But she starts collecting money again. That has to do with her husband. I haven't quite figured that one out yet. Wait a minute, I'll figure it out in a minute. If we want someone to do something or not to do something only once, the most effective strategy would be to promise a large reward or threaten severe punishment. We want to keep them from doing something one time. But if you want someone to become committed to an attitude or behavior, the smaller the reward or punishment that will lead to momentary compliance, the greater the eventual change will be, and therefore the more permanent. So you offer them something small. In the case of black olives, with me, it was a kiss. I'll give you a kiss if you try a black olive. Oh, geez, that's so much. Wow. And it worked. Eventually, she kissed me enough so that I ate a lot of black olives, and I developed a taste for it. Larger rewards and severe punishments as strong external justifications encourage compliance but prevent real attitude change. And so this is something that you need to remember. If you want to change somebody's behavior, you need to either punish them in a small manner, or you need to give them a small reward. If you give them a large reward, you don't change their behavior. You haven't changed anything. The hypocrisy paradigm. Now we're going to talk about hypocrisy. President Bill Clinton was about to be impeached by Congress for a sexual liaison he had with a White House intern. It has this whole wound has reopened. Now, all of a sudden, Monica Lewinsky is giving interviews. She's the White House intern, of course, that was the subject of the impeachment. You guys weren't around when this was all taking place. You don't remember Bill Clinton. You don't remember what was happening because you're all way too young. But what was going on, the Republicans are going, oh my God, he's so immoral. He's having sex with someone who's not his wife. Oh, they were so shocked. Oh, righteous indignation. So the conservative right decided that they were going to impeach him because they were so appalled at his sexual behavior of Bill Clinton. So Newt Gingrich was the Speaker of the House at the time, and he was about to start the impeachment hearing when it was revealed that Newt Gingrich, not only was he having an affair at the time, but he had been divorced twice, mainly because he had started an affair with somebody else. So he had lost 2 wives because of his affairs. And he was having this fairly long standing affair with this other woman. So it was fairly hypocritical for Newt Gingrich to be the Speaker of the House and to impeach somebody for immorality. Didn't make any sense. So they trolled around in the Republican Party. The Republicans controlled the House at that time, and they found Bob Livingston. Bob Livingston is from Illinois. He looked like an upstanding, good Christian soldier. He was he'd been married for 35 years. Turned out old Bob Livingston was having an affair, and then, of course, it was all disclosed. I mean, nobody looked into this. Nobody really cared if people were having an affair. But when they were trying to impeach Bill Clinton, it really didn't make a whole lot of sense for Bob Livingston, of course, to be the individual that gavelled it in. Okay, so now we've lost 2 speakers of the House for immorality in the face of impeachment hearings. Are you getting the picture? So the whole country is up in arms because Bill Clinton has had an affair with this young lady. And now we find out that Newt Gingrich has been doing this forever, and we also find out that Bob Livingston has been having a long-standing affair, despite the fact that he's married. Well, enter Dennis Hastert. He's the one that gavelled in the impeachment hearings. They called him the coach because he was a wrestling coach, and he was kind of built like a wrestler. Unfortunately, of course, Hastert had a tainted past as well that nobody found out about until much, much later, several decades later, 2 decades later actually. Hastert is currently in jail for 4 counts of serial child molestation. When he was a wrestling coach, he was molesting his wrestlers. So here we have 3 members of the righteous indignation, suffering from righteous indignation. Three members of the House of Representatives, 3 highly conservative individuals, 3 very Christian gentlemen, Newt Gingrich, Bob Livingston, and Dennis Hastert, and all of them had exactly, or a worse tainted past than Bill Clinton and his cigar and his affair with Monica Lewinsky, as odd as that sounds. Does this fit the hypocrisy paradigm? Were they hypocrites with all this righteous indignation? Of course they were. Of course they were. But I don't know what they were trying to do. They're trying to get rid of Bill Clinton, I guess. Anyway, Hastert wasn't caught because he was actually what he was doing is paying off all these wrestlers that he had molested. He didn't want them to come out and tell people that he had this thing for young pubescent males. So he was paying them hush money, and he was doing it illegally. He was paying them illegally. He had this. He was using illegal banking practices, and that's how he got caught. And now he's in jail. He'll probably be in jail for the rest of his life. But he's the one that gabbled in the impeachment hearings, as odd as that may seem. Hypocrisy is where an individual states a position to the point of preaching and then does the opposite in practice. Do as I say, not as I do, but a great deal more extreme. That is what hypocrisy is. You probably don't remember this guy. He was the personal preacher for George W. Bush when he was president of the United States. His name's Ted Haggard. He was in the White House all the time, helping George W., praying with him, putting his hand on his head so that he could give him all the sanctity that he needed. He's a millionaire. He was a millionaire. He's not a millionaire anymore. He was an evangelist. He's a multimillionaire. The religious right just loved this guy, just fell in love with this guy. And then he got caught. He preached against adultery, he preached against homosexuality, he preached against sex before marriage, and he preached against abortion. And that was part of his message. George W. Bush thought of changing the laws in the United States to fit his morality. And then he got caught.
He got caught with, he was gay, right? Or he is gay?
He is gay.
Yeah, I remember that story.
Yeah, he got caught. He was paying a male prostitute to come over, and not only was he having, gay sex, he was not only was he a homosexual, but they were also using drugs when he was having sex with this guy. Not only that, but he was having sex with lots of different guys. So this individual that was preaching against adultery, he was married, of course, at the time, and had a family. Not only was he committing adultery, and not only was he in a gay relationship, but he was also having sex with I guess that's adultery, so it didn't have anything to do with marriage, and he certainly couldn't impregnate the individuals that he was having sex with. But he's having these wild sex parties with all these individuals. Is that hypocritical? That pretty much fits the mold. Hypocrisy is a form of fundamental attribution error. Hypocrites judge others as worse than they are themselves, even though they perform the same or worse than the people that they are condemning. We see a lot of individuals who are extroverts. We see a lot of individuals who are narcissistic, who become hypocrites, or they are hypocrites. And it has to do with their narcissism. It has to do with their extroversion. They act one way, but they perform another way outside of their of what you see. They're almost like actors. This is me over here, and this is me over here, and I am two different people. And as far as a narcissist is concerned, he can do that. They can rationalize this hypocrisy, as odd as that may seem. So we're going to see a lot of politicians who are extroverts, of course, and that's the reason that they were elected. We're going to see a lot of politicians who are hypocrites. It's going to be interesting to see what Marco Rubio does about the whole gun thing, because at that town meeting, he said that he wanted to raise the age of being able to buy a rifle from 18 to 21. And you could buy an AR-15 at 18, but you have to wait until you're 21 to buy a pistol, which seems a little odd and a little strange. So he admitted, or he said during that town meeting that he thought that they should do that. He also said that they shouldn't ban AR-15s. So we'll see what happens with Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio gets more money from the NRA than just about any other politician. So we'll see if he's a paid spokesman. We'll see what happens.
Who's that?
We'll see how he votes when
Who's the
this
head
comes.
person for NAR or NRA?
LaPierre? Yeah, I can't think of his
Is
first.
that French?
Yeah, it turns out to be. He's kind of an interesting person. Listen to one of his speeches sometimes. He's kind of interesting. So it's going to be interesting to see if Marco Rubio says one thing in one setting and something else in another setting. We'll see how he votes when this comes up, when raising the age of obtaining an AR-15 comes up. We'll see what happens. Hypocracy induction is making people aware of their hypocrisy, causing them cognitive dissonance. And of course, that's what you have to do. You have to point out to them, well, you're saying this, but you're actually acting this way. And when you do that, you get a kind of an interesting reaction. The Japanese did research looking at this in 2006, Takaku. He showed that when people are made aware of their hypocritical dissonance, they go quickly from anger to forgiveness. In other words, at first it makes them mad that you tell them that they are being a hypocrite, but then they ask for forgiveness. That's in Japan. I'm guessing in the United States it's the opposite. Or maybe you don't even ever ask for forgiveness. Anger is probably all that we see. So sometimes you talk to people and they say, well, all politicians are liars. I said this yesterday. I said, who's the worst liars in abnormal psychology class? And people with antisocial personality disorder, of course, are really good liars. Alcoholics are really good liars. But the first thing I got out of anybody's mind was politicians. I don't think they were kidding. They really think that all politicians are liars. Well, if we understand who politicians are, how do you get elected to office? Well, first of all, you have to be extroverted. Yeah, okay. And second of all, you have to be kind of narcissistic. I'm smarter than anybody else. I'm smarter than that guy. That guy did all these bad things. He's got all these bad ideas. My ideas are better than his. That's kind of narcissistic if you think about it. So these individuals, the probability that they're going to practice hypocrisy is fairly high because of their extroversion and because of their narcissism. So politicians, it's really hard to pin them down. That's kind of interesting. If we look at John McCain at the beginning of his political career, he's always been a maverick. Well, he has always been a maverick, but in the beginning of his political career, he was far more conservative. He stayed more with the party line than later on. As his pain got worse, as his problems increased, John McCain actually became less narcissistic and less hypocritical, less extroverted. He's willing to go against his own party. I mean, he did that when he voted not to repeal Obamacare. Kind of interesting. So as far as politicians go, you guys, well, not only that, but you had another conservative, you elected another conservative senator, Senator Flake, and Flake decided he wasn't going to run again because he would have to be too hypocritical. He would have to go against his own beliefs. He'd have to go against the people of Arizona. So he's decided not to run again. And what's Trump doing as far as Flake is concerned? Geez, he attacks him like every third day. He attacks Senator Flake because he can't control it. He has become less narcissistic. What about the president? Is he narcissistic? Is he extroverted?
Not extroverted. Well, there's one that keeps popping up. Is Bruce Babbitt. He shut down the mines near the San Francisco peaks,
Mm-hmm.
and then years later he went on jump on board with the snowball effect, going along with the creators of it, the fake snow, and going against what he believed in with the Native Americans.
Right. Well, yeah, and it is kind of interesting. They come out against fake snow. I thought, well, really? Okay, that's interesting. You guys don't have enough moisture this year in the mountains, so you can't ski. And of course, I guess it's the Hopi that don't want any fake snow. Aren't they the ones that? It's another tribe. Okay.
Yeah.
No, you probably don't know who they are.
Yesterday I was coming back from Cortez and right by the Ute Mountain, there's like a big old like mountain looking thing.
Yeah.
And my husband was like, oh, I'd love to turn this into a ski resort. And I start laughing and I was like, there's no snow. There's no snow.
It's February and there's no snow.
You need snow. And he was like, oh, you can make snow.
See? Your husband's obviously not a Hokie. Yeah, they've come out against fake snow for some reason. Dissonance theory predicts that when we dislike someone, if we do them a favor, we will like them more. So if you're trying to cure yourself of not liking somebody, maybe you ought to do something for them. It will fix the fact that you don't like them anymore. Benjamin Franklin did this. He had an enemy, and he turned him into a friend by doing the guy a favor. And then the guy became his friend. And this is known as the Ben Franklin effect, where you take a former enemy, you do something nice for that person, and then they become your friend. That's known as the Ben Franklin effect.
Or in the Bible, it's known as love thy neighbor.
Okay. Okay. Well, we're Americans, so we'll say Ben Franklin. How's that? Okay. Not the third Ephesians or whatever it is. During World War I, okay, one of the things that we have to do, we have to justify hating our enemies. It's really hard to kill somebody unless you really don't like them. If we look at all the murders in the United States, the people that we kill, the people that we want to kill, are people that we don't like. We have to dehumanize them. Most murders have to do with crimes of passion. You get so angry with somebody that you kill them, even though this is your friend, this is your wife, this is your husband. Eventually you get to the point where you hate that person, and at that point you kill them, of course. Well, if you're in the military, one of the things you have to do is hate your enemy. The reality is that most enemies look pretty much like you do. They act just like you do. They're humans just like you are. They have families. They have mothers. They have fathers. How in the world can you possibly kill this person? Well, the way that you do it is by dehumanizing the enemy. And we did this during World War I. This is one of the posters from World War I. As you can see, this guy's got what do they call that? Pickle Haub. That's that German helmet. And as you can see, he looks like an ape, some kind of a monster. Not only that, but he's carrying a young lady and he's torn her top off. I know, how horrible is that? He's going to rape her. This ape is going to rape this red-headed woman. She's got red hair, as interesting as that is. They are trying to dehumanize the Germans. It makes it easier to kill this guy than it would if he looked like me. Well, maybe not. Maybe it would be easier to kill him if he looked like me. But since he looks like an ape, it's a lot easier to shoot him. We also give them strange names. Normally, if we're fighting against somebody, we don't call them the Vietnamese. We call them the VC. We call them Charlie. We call them a negative name. We call them, what do we call them? Zipperheads. We call them zipperheads. What? What's a zipperhead? During World War I, they called the Germans Huns and Krauts. These are other posters from These are from World War II. As you can see, the Japanese, he wears glasses just like Curtis does. Okay. He's got buck teeth, and once again, he's carrying a naked woman. As odd as that seems, and he's carrying a pistol. Here's another. Look at this guy. His fingernails look like claws. Isn't that something? He's chasing this lady with a knife. This obviously Caucasian woman. And look at his mouth and his teeth. Oh my goodness gracious! I know. Rape. That's what this is supposed to tell you. That's what the last one told you, isn't it? Yeah, he's going to rape that woman. Okay, rape. And Jap, you're next, of course. Buy bonds. But we're not done, of course. Soldiers eat babies. Everybody knows that. Soldiers eat babies. That's a fact. Think of the children. Join Team dim a man today and make those monsters pay. Look at his fingernails. Once again, claws rather than fingernails. And of course, here's a crazed Hitler. We've got to stop him. Don't kid yourself. It's up to you to stop him. He's a crazed lunatic, of course. Dehumanize the enemy. That's what you got to do. You got to change the way people think. And that's the way you do it. Fighting an enemy is still fighting another human with all the attributes of any other human. Often this can only be done if the enemy is dehumanized. It happens in every war and often is propaganda before combat begins. Such prejudice makes ruthlessness and cruelty easier. This is a picture from the rape of Mccain. The Japanese dehumanized their Chinese enemy by murdering and raping as many people as they possibly could. They killed babies, they raped and murdered women, they beheaded men and lined the heads up. And this is a way that you dehumanize the enemy. When the U.S. government was fighting against the native tribes, how did they dehumanize the Indians?
Savage.
They referred to you as savages?
Redskin.
As Redskins? Wait a minute, we still have a football team named the Redskins. Is that dehumanizing? So why in the world haven't they changed the name? Why haven't they changed the name? That's kind of an insulting term. Why in the world haven't they changed the name? Curtis knows. Are you finding out? Why have they changed the name? What's going on here? Evidently. If it has to do with money, then it's okay. Yeah. We can insult people for money, I guess. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me either. Not exactly sure. What if they had an insulting term for white people? Would they still allow that name to go forward? Cowboys? No, wait a minute, that's not insulting.
They don't realize they're too assimilated.
They ignore it, I guess.
Yeah, they simply choose to.
Yeah.
I guess in their perspective, it's just a common word, but they don't really think about the past historical traumas that it caused and how it relates to the present time.
Right. Okay, so the Redskins are where are they? Where are the Redskins?
Washington.
Washington, D.C. That's the nation's capital, right? I just made that up. I don't know if that's true. What if that team were in Phoenix? The Arizona Redskins. Would that fly? You think it would? Curtis doesn't think it would.
I think it would. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't find it offensive. Should I?
It's up to you. I mean, that's a belief you have. I find it offensive.
I think it has its pros and cons.
Yeah.
There's a pro?
Well, I've seen in an article
Mhm.
where they got a few Native Americans to say that that they're more proud of it than ashamed of
Okay.
the football team.
Okay. Well, we also have the Kansas City Chiefs.
I guess that's where the pros concept comes into play. They actually have a couple of teams that are out there, and then also within the present day and age that we are in, they see it as a positive aspect based on.
At least they recognize that you exist.
There you
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
I can think of better
Outside
ways.
of that,
Okay.
there's a whole different ballgame.
Well, in baseball, they have a team called the Cleveland Indians. They were named after one of their best players back in 1903 or something. But then they started drawing these cartoons of American Indians, and they were fairly offensive. And that one cartoon they used until last year. And they've actually banned it now. They're not going to use that Chief Wahoo anymore. Okay, so they're just going to call themselves the Indians, and I guess they have no logo. ESPN had stopped using their logo about 5 years ago. They refused to use the logo. They used a capital C instead. That tells you what team it is, right? There's only, what, 4 teams with C's? Chicago, Cincinnati, and the 2 Chicago teams, Cincinnati and Cleveland. Okay, not that that's important.
And then you got Braves too.
They got the Braves. They've got the Braves. You're right. They got the Braves.
It's interesting how the colors they use for the chief baseball symbol, of all colors they had to use was red.
Red, white, and blue.
Yeah.
Right. But his face is red. I mean, not just red. It's bright
All
red.
red.
Yeah. Like anybody has a face like that. Well, I have a face like that when I sunburned myself. So I guess I'm the only real redskin. You guys don't have red faces. That's really crazy. Anyway, okay, so this is relatively dehumanizing. We all agree it's relatively dehumanizing? To some extent, okay. Depending on how you look at it. It's a lot easier to be ruthless. It's a lot easier to be cruel to an enemy that you have dehumanized. It's easier to kill them. One of the things that happened in Afghanistan and Iraq, they started referring to the enemy not as Iraqis or Sunnis or Shias or Afghans. They started calling them Hajis. Hajis. And that's how they dehumanized them. It's a lot easier to shoot a Haji than it is to shoot the father of 5 children or whatever. So we need to dehumanize the enemy. Cruel behavior is dissonant with our view of ourselves as a decent human being. So in order for us to rationalize our behavior, to be cruel, to kill select individuals, we have to rationalize, in order to rationalize that, we have to dehumanize the enemy. We have to act like they are more cruel than we are. We have to come up with reasons why they deserve to die. And we may do that, well, there's a lot of different ways that we do that. One of them is to attack their religion, to attack their cultural practices, and this is one of the ways that we do it. During World War II, unbeknownst to a lot of people, the Japanese would not surrender. We couldn't get them to surrender. And they didn't think that we were going to surrender. So if you, at the beginning, especially at the beginning of the war, one of the things that happened was that, especially at the beginning of the war, if they would take no prisoners, and we would take no prisoners. We'd kill them all. Kill them all. We just killed everybody. Because we knew that they weren't going to surrender. And then we would have to knock them unconscious and then tie them up to keep them from committing suicide. So when we look at the Japanese later on in the war, they were doing things like bonsai attacks. Whole masses of men without any ammunition would attack, a small group of Americans, and they would kill as many Japanese as they possibly could. Or possibly they would overrun the American position. But we weren't taking any prisoners, and neither were they. Not only that, but they were torturing our prisoners before they killed them, as ugly as that may seem. Are you getting the picture? Not very pleasant, is it? If we harm someone, this creates dissonance between what we did, inflict pain on another person, and our view of ourselves as a decent person. To resolve the dissonance, we may come to hate our victim and engage in dehumanization. So in order for a husband to beat his wife, to physically abuse his wife, he has to dehumanize her first. As interesting as that is. By convincing ourselves that our victim is less than human, we reduce our own dissonance. So you've got an individual, and maybe he needs to get drunk before he can do that. So when he gets drunk, maybe he abuses his wife. Of course, that anesthetizes the reasoning portion of your brain, and maybe it makes it easier for him to physically abuse her. There's a reason why he's physically abusing her. There's something in his past that makes him want to physically abuse that individual, that makes him have to do that. But now he has to rationalize it in his own mind. Does all this make sense? And this is taking place on a relatively frequent basis. He may not hit his wife unless he's drunk. Does that mean that that it's the alcohol that's making him hit his wife? No, it's allowing him to hit his wife. He wants to do it otherwise. And we have to figure all this stuff out. If we've got a wife, a spousal abuser, we need to figure out what it is out in their past that makes them think that they need to abuse their spouse. As psychologists, if we're dealing with this. Why do they think that they're supposed to abuse their spouse? All too often, prejudice is rationalized in much the same way by dehumanizing the target population. And we do this with words such as redskin. We'll just use that word since it's the name of a football team. Or chief. When I was in the military, if you had an American Indian, you referred to him as chief. Of course, there's a rank in the Air Force, Chief Master Sergeant. And we didn't call him Chief Master Sergeant usually. We referred to him as chief. But he wasn't usually an American Indian. He didn't have to be an American Indian. He just had that rank. But we do this. We give them select names. And there are lots and lots of really nasty names out there that you probably have never heard. Hopefully you've never heard these names. I'm sure you've heard the N-word if you've listened to rap music. And the fact that they're a mofo. I know what that means. I know.
Did you just say mofo?
I did, I said mofo. I saw that on television last night. I thought I'd repeat it.
Quanah, tell them what it means.
Does anybody not know what that means? Okay, we're good. We're good. Okay. This has been the fate of just about any minority in the United States. We have negative names for just about everybody, including Germans. During World War I, people that were of German ancestry had to change the way they spelled their names. If their name was Schmidt, Schmidt, S-C-H-M-I-D-T, which is the German spelling for Smith, they had to change their name to Smith, which is the English spelling for Smith. Or well, I guess it's the American spelling for Smith as well. But they had to change their names because people got angry with them because they were of German descent. So they had to change their names. We already know what they called them. Krauts and Huns. Dehumanization of outgroups, minorities, or enemies is an unfortunately common way of reducing dissonance. And of course we do that by giving them really relatively negative names. Who was I talking to last night? Oh, Marius. We were talking about Quanah Parker. Do you know who Quanah Parker is? Anybody know who Quanah Parker is? He's the guy that started the Native American Church. Well, that's not why we were talking about him. He was also a war chief of the Comanche tribe. He was also, his mother was named Parker. Or Anna Parker was her name. And she'd been captured by the Comanches. She was a white lady that was captured by the Comanches. She gave birth to like 15 children. But one of them was Quanah. It was Quanah Parker. I know the story of what happened to her. They captured her. The army captured her and took her back to civilization, as it were. And she was very upset the whole time. She refused to speak English, that kind of thing. And she died like a year and a half later. She just died of depression. She was so sad that she had lost it. Anyway, so we were kidding back and forth, and we used this term, or he used that term. I didn't use it. Anyway, he called Quanah Parker a half-breed. I know. That was kind of an interesting thing to say. And we both laughed. We thought it was funny. Anyway, yeah, and we were doing it for humorous reasons. But these are all words that people use. I guess raghead is another name. Towelhead. When I was in the military, we were training. Who were we training? Iranians. We were training them to fly assault jets. And every time you talk to somebody that had been dealing with these individuals, they referred to them as ragheads or towelheads, which was kind of interesting. Okay, so that's where prejudice comes from. That we're dealing with cognitive dissonance again. And one of the reasons you give people a negative name, I'm assuming belladonna is not an insulting term. Is it? No, it's not. Anyway, we refer, the reason we refer to them in an insulting way is to dissipate our own dissonance. And that dehumanizes them to an extent. So all of these words that you see here are ways of dissipating our own dissonance. Rationalizing our hate for somebody. And it allows us to dehumanize them, and it makes it more likely that we're going to be able to deal with that situation. Okay, that's the end of chapter 6. I just needed to get into chapter 7 today. Because this is the 7th week. And it's also the 1st of March, so congratulations, we made it to March. Next week is the 8th week, and I don't know when midterm is, but we don't have to worry about it in here, right? We don't have to worry about it in here because all of our stuff is online. So just get something done so I can give you guys a grade. If you're caught up, I think that's fantastic. If you're ahead, way to go. Good job. But if you need to catch up, you need to do something in here so I can give you a grade. And if you haven't done anything, I'll have to give you a bad grade. And I don't want to give anybody a bad grade. You're all good students, and I love you all dearly, so it breaks my heart when I have to give you a bad grade. How much time do I have? 7 minutes? I can do that. Okay. Oh, jeez, I don't have my glasses on. I can't see numbers. Oh, man. Where is it? Where is chapter 7? It must be somewhere. I know it's here somewhere. 7. There we go. Okay. Attitudes and persuasion. Let's persuade people. Now that we understand how they're thinking, well, let's change. I'm not going to play Tosca for you. You guys want to hear Tosca? Tosca? It's opera. How many people like opera? I got 2 of us. Okay. This is for me and Edison. I think. Will it work? Let's see if it works. Let's see, it's working on here. It's not working on there. You'll be able to hear it but not see it. Or maybe you won't even be able to hear it. You can come up here if you want. You can hear it better.
I can hear it.
Okay. Tosca. Tosca is a really kind of interesting opera. It's about a young lady. That doesn't want to get married, and then she meets this guy. She meets the guy that's singing, and she falls immediately in love with him, and he falls immediately in love with her. Turns out, of course, that they're rebels in Vienna or in Florence. They're rebels, and so the rebellion kind of starts, as it were. And they capture him, and Tosca is a very, very beautiful woman. She's the most beautiful woman in the city. And the prince wants to have his way with her. And of course, she keeps refusing him, and then he tells her that if she gives herself to him, that he will. He's already captured her, this new love that she has. If she gives herself to him, then he will allow the guy to live, and they can run away together. But she has to spend the night with him, the prince. That's what he says. And this is the night before his execution. He says, I've never been in love. I've never wanted to get married, and now I found Tosca, and I'm madly in love. Isn't this the way the world works? I finally find love, and now I'm going to die tomorrow. And that's why there was so much anguish in his voice. Yeah, I know, it's a really interesting play. I won't tell you what happens later. But there is kind of a strangely happy ending, I guess, if you like suicide. So there's just a happy ending. Okay. I know. Oh, come on. Okay, I'll tell you the rest of the story. Do I have time?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'll tell you the rest of the story. Okay, so what happens is he convinces her that he'll let the guy go if she spends the night with him. So she says yes, and everybody else leaves, and she's there, a little bitty Tosca and this great big hulking monster. And he says, "Come to me, honey." And she grabs a knife off the table and she kills him with one stab. It's really kind of amazing. Of course, it takes him a while to die, and he gets to sing while he's dying. She kills him. She kills him, and then she hides his body. She has to hide his body because at dawn the next morning, this guy's going to be executed. So she goes to her new boyfriend. He sings this song before dawn, before she comes to him. And then she goes down to him and she says, "We've already worked it out. They've got blanks in the guns. Don't worry about it." And he says, "I don't think that that's what's going to happen." And she says, "Sure. The prince assured me that that's what's going to happen." So guess what happens next? Well, they take him out and they actually put bullets in their guns and they actually kill him. About that time, they find the body of the guy, of the prince, and she runs down to him and realizes that she keeps saying, "Okay, get up, we have to escape now, Of course, he's dead because he's been shot by the firing squad. So about that time, she hears the guards discover the body and they start yelling, "Find Tosca, find Tosca." So she runs up to the top of the battlement and jumps off. Isn't that kind of a happy ending? She gets to kill the bad guy. The bad guy dies. That's a good thing, right? Anyway, that's Tosca. It's Puccini. I know, it's kind of interesting. So it's kind of a happy song. It's a happy song in that he finds love, and it's an unhappy song in that he loses love almost immediately after he finds it. Anyway, that's Tosca. Crazy Italian.
I stayed in Florence for last time.
And they play this theme throughout the whole opera. You keep hearing this theme. Love found and love lost. I'll see you guys next time, and we'll tackle the rest of chapter 7. So I'm caught up. Curtis, tell all your friends I'm caught up. I'm on chapter 7 in the 7th week. I know I got said like one thing. But I told you the story of Tosca. Puccini. Is everybody okay? We can go now. You don't have to stay. See you. I just need one thing. I just need one grade so that I can give you guys a grade for midterm. One thing. I'm sorry?
Social psychology, chapter, research,
Right.
discussion.
Right.
So for the research,
Right.
do we have to read books?
No. The research is, you go to that one social psychology
Oh, okay.
website, and you take one of their surveys, and then you just tell me what it was all about. Some of them are really long, so you have to be careful. You have to be selective as to which one you want to use. Okay. All right.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing well.
Yeah?
How you doing?
Alright.
Okay, I worry about it.
Oh, yeah, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I try not to.
Well, you're still headed to AHEC, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, you're gonna run for president, right?
Trying to.
Okay, good. Good.
Took you too long.
I vote for you.
Okay, I remember what the discussion question you're talking about. It was like right after the discussions, and then there's like a survey, right? That little piece up at the bottom.
Yeah, so you have to go to that website, the social site website, and then there's a list. I mean, it's like 3 pages long.
Yeah, I've done it a couple times.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
yeah.
and just take a survey and write it up, you know, tell me what it was all about, what the title was, whether the title actually fit what they did. Because in social psychology, they use deception a lot.
Mhm.
So sometimes they'll tell you it's about, you know, finding a new boyfriend, and it's about your attitudes about something else, you know, it's really kind of silly.
Okay.
So,
I know what Hopi is. I used to be with them for about 10 years.
is that right?
I've been to the villages and
This drives me nuts. And I hate to talk about this, but oh, no, we don't want to admit that there's other Indians out there. You know, you see it in class, and you can't get anybody who's used the word Apache to write. What is it? A cigarette? I don't understand. It just drives me nuts.
yeah, I've been with the Hopi for about 10 years. I don't think I've seen my family for a lot different. Yeah, for a while. She came here. She tried coming out here. I think she came out here right to me. She did 2 summers out here once. She liked it. She liked it. I've just seen the villages and hang out in Flagstaff a lot for a lot.
Well, it's interesting because they live right on top of each other.
Yeah.
You guys don't.
Yeah. The ceremonies are. I didn't want to ask questions about it. So you know,
They're all secret.
Yeah, it is. It's just completely shut down. They won't say a word about it. Sometimes when you sit in and you hear, they see you, they say something, then they stop. And then you know that's.
Yeah. This is something, this is an area that you're not supposed to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've been there, done that, and have been shut down a lot. Yeah, we'll see you, Francis. Yeah, shut down a lot. I'm the last person anybody would tell.
Real quick, I gotta tell you something. And it's not really my place to say anything, but as a staff of Dene College,
Yeah?
is that on record?
No. Oh, yes it is, I'm sorry. I'm calling. It's gonna be a long tape.